over OBS only.
Capitalism, all of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number, or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know,
It's a
Zach.
tough one.
This
I
is
know,
really hard.
and maybe
Yes.
comparing numbers is not Jeremy Strong's. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. Tonight, as per usual, we have Dan Platt of the Three Left Show on the show. This is our first show of the new year, so Happy New Year to y'all. Happy New Year, Dan. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, just peachy keen.
Peachy Keen.
Looking forward to what excitement and adventure awaits in 2024.
Yeah, it's going to be a big year, that's for sure. Presidential election years are always big, whether or not you go in for that sort of thing. So,
Eh, big to who?
yeah, big to the advertisers, that's for sure.
Yes, they love it.
So, yeah. Um,
And also, just trying to rip the band-aid off of leaving my the one project and struggling to start the next one. Like the new world we're trying to build, it's struggling to be
Struggling to be
born
born.
in
Yeah.
the shell of the old, and the shell being me trying to make sure that I didn't waste the last 3 years of my life with the radio station. Because you see, if everything I did is torn apart by the intransigence or the managing incompetence, management people anyway, of the executive director, it's like I it will be for naught. Like the work I did, it's like the station will fall apart. Because over the fall, he's mentioned whenever it comes up, like he wants to cull the number of producers, if they don't pay dues or not. And I'm like, well, we're not asking them to pay dues, not regularly enough. We're not giving them warnings or anything. And you keep mentioning you're going to call, oh, we got to get some of these people out of here. Like, but you're not moving to do any of that. So either you're just going to like let things lie and deteriorate naturally, or you're just going to actually just cut, and basically destroy half the programming of the station, make the station like it was 5 years ago when it started. You got 5 or 6 DJs who are going to do what they're going to do because they've got all their equipment. They don't really have, they don't need support. They can just do it. But anyone who does need support is not going to get it, and they will leave, or just it will be non-functional. And so it's just like, what do you? And I can tell, like him and the board, it's like they don't want the station to be what it should be. They talk like there's all this great potential, but there's no movement on it. Like it's the movement is on fixing up the building, and I just saw the renderings, and it's just like you're not taking this. Like the renderings were really bad. Like I wish I was paid to do them. I would have made them somewhat more interesting, or maybe because I'm not that experienced, it's like they look like I did them because like they were done by an amateur
Yeah.
who hasn't worked in the sector.
Some random.
And the one for the radio station was just like it's a closet room with the logo for the station on it on the wall. That's it. And there's no equipment. There's no like it looks like it's just there. There isn't even any picture of a computer in there, or the equipment. Like he doesn't. Whoever rendered this doesn't know what the station is,
He has no idea.
and it's like you don't know what it is. How it's like, oh man, it's just you don't want to know. He doesn't want to know, and he doesn't want to hire someone who would know. Um, I mean, no one can be hired, and or it's a matter of finding the right volunteer. But guess what? It's like they haven't done it. Like if you want me to shut up and move out of the way, um, But then he would say, well, we'll consider making you the manager. I'm like, well, then do it. Make me say I'm the manager, but you haven't. So instead, you're like, oh no. And this is not his problem. This is all nonprofits' problems. It's like the only way we can make sure, and this is like the union locals problem, any org that's using the corporate structure, because that is the dominant the structure of our society. It really is a big problem. The left isn't really making alternatives to that, or at least maybe all of these entities that aren't the left. They're not the left. Nonprofits aren't the left. Unions aren't the left, because they're all using corporate structures. So it's painful to admit this, but I think there are horizontal organizations out there. But even the IWW seems to have a little bit, or parties, have a corporate structure. Even if they operate in more horizontalist fashion, they still are required to have a board or a standing management committee or something like that. But anyway, what I'm getting at is that sometimes functionally it becomes corporate and hierarchical, because say you want to keep track of your finances and your spending, and the only way you can really do that without having a big ass bureaucracy of some kind, or at least an onerous one, is for one person just to be doing all the spending. That would be the director, Right. It's like, well, I can't trust anyone to spend money on behalf of the org. Only I can do that. So I have to do everything, unless it doesn't include money, which is a very little, not a lot. There isn't much in this world that doesn't involve using some kind of money.
Right.
Like I buy a banner, I have to ask for reimbursement. Will I ever get it? I don't know. Or the comms, the comms need to be consistent. So it needs to be one person who controls all the comms, and there's no other volunteer for comms. So I have to do it. It didn't have to be, but there's also this practical, like, I can't argue with it based on the circumstances. Like, yeah, you need to control the Facebook. You want to do the emailing to all the producers in your corporate style, but it's weird. It's weird, or it's frustrating rather, because just as I'm trying to train my replacement, my access to the remote desktop for accessing the broadcast computer was blocked by changing the password.
No.
And I'm pretty sure he would be the one to do that, and is it a matter of time before he changes all the door codes so I can't access the building? It's like, look, I'm not burning it down on my way out.
Right.
I want things to work. And I sort of said I want to leave by the end of the year, but certain things didn't happen very quickly, mostly because of the holidays. And I had a cold, so that slowed me down for a week. But even so, I knew that I would be doing some things in January. There's one more person to train, so I don't want to leave him hanging.
Sure.
But now it's like everything I hate about the org, that's why I'm leaving, is now preventing me from leaving on good terms. Which is why usually when one walks away from community projects, you don't do it on good terms. There is no good way. If there was, then I think people wouldn't be walking away. People wouldn't be shuffling from one project to another, shopping around like you would for toothpaste. And so I was looking up at work critiques of volunteerism, and really frustrating was there's only two kind of videos that came up. One type were TED Talks and other corporate style stuff, content about volunteerism and how great it is and how it makes people feel better. People, feel love and giving back.
Sure.
All this petit bourgeois crap. And the other half was a alien cult where volunteers are people who don't feel like they don't belong. They're alienated in society. It always goes back to, like, you're just alienated, idiot. Marx talked about this a century ago. Right. People feel alienated, and they conclude, maybe through use of some psychedelics, that they are actually an alien soul who has come down to Earth to save the world.
Oh, no.
So you have this woman who wrote a book called The 3 Waves of Volunteers. It's like I'm the first wave, the ones who are just laying the groundwork and playing. People in the '60s, basically, and then the second wave is like I didn't get that far, but the third wave are the young people who just they're just ready to go. And the only explanation is that they're alien souls. Because
Alien souls.
how else can you explain that some people are motivated and communitarian minded, and most people are not?
Yeah.
Can't be ideology.
No.
No, can't be systemic problems.
Yeah, it could be
It's
material conditions. No.
it's because humanity are like sheep, and I'm not a sheep, but I'm not a wolf either, because I'm not looking to eat sheep.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an other, and the only kind of other I can imagine is an alien. So that was the other type of volunteerism video.
Oh man.
About volunteers, volunteer documentary is what I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
So and the same thing happens in a normal web search. Just like I looked for critiques of volunteerism, and I didn't really get anything useful. And I'm like, are leftists not writing about this? Because this is a serious, I think it's a serious issue to me.
Oh, absolutely.
Because volunteerism is intertwined with neoliberal practice, postmodern practice, that we can't trust the government or any organization. We have to volunteer our time because that's non-market labor. We're working outside of the market. If we don't want our labor to be a commodity, I have to volunteer it for free.
Right.
And giving, and that's sharing, and sharing is caring. So it's counter capitalist. But at the same time, it's to capitalism's benefit, because most of the volunteer is services not provided by the marketplace, but are needed to keep society going. And it's like, there's sort of an accelerationist in me, which says, like, let it burn. Don't provide these services. But that only increases the suffering of people and only makes things worse and more dystopian. So don't be an acceleration.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, don't help, but help in a way where you are building dual power, and not a way that, like, because nonprofits are not dual power.
No.
It really sucks that they're not, but they were started by all of the more radical people before. They are the dominant. You need to start a corporation if you're going to act in the society, unless there is other legal forms provided, which is why one of the lobbying efforts in New York by Citizen Action is to make it easier to buy out your lease as a tenant, so you can start housing co-ops. Because in New York City metro area, it's possible to do that. That's why there are like a lot of different types of housing co-ops, and it's people who do have affordable rent are in those entities. And we don't have them in the rest of the state, because they're not allowed, or they're not part of the law. So that's a big step. So I'm digressing, but the volunteerism is, because I'm just burned out from it, because the last 5 years has been part of these volunteerist community projects. No one can be paid, because that's evil, or that would make me a boss, or it would make it a social enterprise, a business. But on the flip side, you have community-minded people saying they're a community, but it's really just a bunch of businesses. Like, well, we have the business owner who's a contractor, who's working with the business owner who is a real estate developer. And it's like, and they're all black, and they're all doing these like little conferences about what a great community they are, when they're really just doing capitalism, but it's black capitalism, I guess. But I mean, but still, the rents are too damn high, and nothing's really getting better. It's frustrating. What was I getting at? Black, not just a black entrepreneur, but any kind of entrepreneurism. It's just like you have these small businesses that their success is baked into moving to the suburbs, where the rents are a little less and access to customers are increased by the ability for people to drive to them, or more space. There's just not a lot of the more space you need, the more expensive it gets in the city. So
Sure.
the greenfield development, because rents are going down in some areas or most areas,
Mhm.
commercial rents. And other times it's a travesty. So I'm not sure what to talk about to wrap up my show, except maybe what the future holds. I want to do a cooperative Jackson, but in Albany, and
That seems to be the model. Yeah.
I emailed them to see what their structure, to ask what their structure is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are they formed as? You know, like they take foundation money. Are they organized as a nonprofit? Are they just like the rest? You know, or are they, because they're making, but actually they're not really an org as much as they're a committee, and they're forming orgs like a community land trust. Because I looked at what they have right now and what they're looking to do next, and they basically have a community land trust. They've bought like 30 properties, probably all like a few grand a piece.
Right.
They're buying the stuff that needs renovation, so they do want to start like a construction co-op, a waste management co-op. So they want to start co-ops that are legitimate businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Then they have an urban farm there, but it seems to be separate from Co-op Jackson. The building they have now, which is their Economic Democracy Center, is really just a meeting space in their office. So that is a good, like, it's their base, you know. So you start with a base, kind of like all those other games, you know, Stardew Valley. Start with a base, and then community land trust, but then the next and the foundation money, as well as the money to train the first 3 techs for a fab lab, to start their 3D printing economy where they make stuff on demand. So they want to make a co-op, form a co-op, which is a fab lab, which is their second main building would be their, what they call it, their community production center. So it kind of reminds me of Margination in Troy. They were a bunch of pseudo anarchists who, their model though was also about getting money from like Tech Valley Bros, and they didn't start. They were kind of doing a cooperative Jackson thing but they didn't have I don't think they had a structure like a land trust. They were just a entity that was buying buildings. They had a co-op for doing the construction, and they were kind of paying people based on their sweat equity. I mean, with sweat equity, meaning when they put in hours renovating the building, you are a part owner of it. But that's your wage. It's trying to make as moneyless as possible, but I think part of what is not included yet is to have a community currency, so that it isn't all in dollars. That you have a job exchange or a task, exchange of things. I think that's usually missing from some of these models. To include a time bank as part of like the scheme of things.
Yeah.
To decommodify. So what I got here though is something a little is different from that kind of how to build socialism in America, where volunteerism is like the norm, but it's actually in decline. In our generation, it's declining.
I guess I'm not surprised. Yeah.
Shouldn't be surprised. And this is just based on AmeriCorps data. Their numbers. It's gone down. What was 50% in the last 20 years?
Really?
And the last 5 years, it went down another 7%.
Oh wow!
From their figures. Maybe that's just their own organization.
Yeah,
but I think that could be across the board.
Huh.
So that's interesting. So people are in fact less community engaged than before. But before, like the community engagement, the volunteering was like, the church groups, the charity.
True.
So people are doing less charity, and maybe it's switching to mutual aid, and that doesn't count in the numbers of the volunteer service organizations, because they're not volunteer service organizations. They're not middle-class people doing things in their free time, because there is no middle class anymore. But do we count? But when does mutual aid become? When is it not volunteerism? And I'm thinking about this because, like, when I help out with Food Not Bombs, I do save money on my grocery bill because it's not charity, it's not one way. I'm getting stuff from Food Not Bombs
Yeah, you
too.
get some of the food too. Yeah.
But there needs to be an input, like real inputs that are not dependent. So much of mutual aid is just working with the leftovers from the economy, when really we need to be, we're working off of the crap made in China or by capitalists. When can the mutual aid take the form of production, and the labor you put in is paid with on-demand goods and services? Because it needs to be a demand-based economy if it's going to be post-capitalist.
Right.
And it needs to be using different kinds of money, currency, that don't accumulate or don't incentivize accumulation. That's the main point of having that. So this is one dime, which did caught my attention because he did a video on the history of the Cultural Revolution in China. A very not so much studied topic, but I knew the base amount of stuff from my modern China course in college. But my impression of it was that it was trying to democratize the economy with these grassroots organizations to carry out revolutionary activity, and it got out of hand because they were undisciplined. At least that's my interpretation, but I think I'm a little wrong based on this one dime's videos. It was actually, they were very disciplined, but they were doing a politics of dismissal. They were replicating the same authoritarian politics of I'm pure, you're not.
Yeah.
I'm the real Red Guard, you're not. So you had Red Guard orgs, the young youth organizations that were fighting each other instead of the state over the little things. And because they weren't being very pluralistic or forgiving or restorative in their justice. The opposite, they were beating former landlords or anyone who was remotely trying to earn a living with dollars or yen. Not yen, I mean. Anyway, I'll have to watch his hour. It's an hour-long video. We're not doing that. But this is his video on another type of topic related to the Green Party too, or just general political theory, is we say we value decentralization, but as far as America goes, it is the most decentralized government because we vest power in private enterprise.
Yeah, that's true.
Not the government. So
that is true.
Our federal government is already very decentralized. States have a good amount of power. Local school boards have a lot of power. They're able to ban books and decide what's in the library, what isn't, what the curriculum is, what isn't. This is a type of, it's argued this is local control. This is autonomy. This is justice. This is grassroots politics, local control. And if anything, that's what makes running for local office so important or so practical for good leftism, and not just focusing on the national level or even state level, because there is some power there. Though in certain states like New York, we don't really have a lot of home rule, but in other states you do. Mm-hmm. Like you can't really set your own taxes in local government here in New York. Or rather, you can set your tax rate, but it has to be property taxes. You can't change what kind of taxes you levy. You can't. Yeah. You need permission if you want to levy a new sales tax or any new taxes. You have to ask for permission, and most Democrats still don't want to raise taxes.
Yeah,
they never did actually. So being the tax and spend party has always been a big lie by the right. The other half of the right. Right. So this is about the separation of powers and how it's broken, because we do have a very decentralized government, or maybe not. It's centralized, but in the bad ways. So let's go into it.
Yeah.
It's been a week or two since I watched this. So. Oh, sorry. I'm doing it.
You are in control this time. Oh, why is... Uh-oh.
Yes.
Volume's not
We
coming
have to
through
save
on mine.
democracy from Trump.
Huh.
Oh yeah, and I want to gag. I didn't go, but yesterday, the 3-year anniversary of the terrible thing that happened, the tragedy.
Mhm.
The local Democratic politicos were all giving speeches in front of the Capitol about how great. Well, man, democracy was so threatened. It was such a big deal, and we're the ones that are defending it. Wow. Yeah, well, it's like what democracy, but it seemed to be a good amount of the rank and file of the county party showed up. People really engaged.
Yeah. The sound is not coming through on my end for whatever reason.
Oh, do you know if it's coming out on OBS?
I don't think so. Go ahead and play it one second here.
Yeah, because the output from my computer may not be the same as the output from my mic. Although, I don't know.
No, OBS is not picking it up.
Okay.
May just have to share the screen on my end. After all.
Let's see what I can do. There's my mic. Where's my settings? Device settings. Camera, microphone. Like my input is my mic. It's not gonna
and that
be
might be the problem.
But it always seems like default in these web calls.
Yeah.
That the computer audio is also part of the call.
Yeah, you would think so. What's the point of sharing your screen if your other participants can't hear it? So.
Well, designed for sharing of presentations, I guess.
Okay, so. Well, let me just try and share it from my end instead. So why don't you stop sharing your screen? We'll see if we can get it by other means.
Do you need that link?
Yeah, why don't you just message me the link there in chat, and I'll put it up on my side.
Okay, I'm sending a messenger.
All right.
Oh, there's that Biden ad.
We're using way too many platforms for work. We should just use Monday.com.
We're not using that
Okay,
many.
got him.
HRCRS.
It's 2 videos.
Okay, cool.
Messenger.
Got it. Yeah, I got the first one up. Let me just try sharing it from my side. Hopefully you can hear it then. But
yeah. Let's see if we have the reverse problem.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll go to my talk.
Yeah.
My leftist, my Green Party onboarding.
Yeah, it says also
share
tab audio.
Something I was inspired to do based on the onboarding. The one part of the radio station I was enjoying was the onboarding of new producers or DJs. And I kind of made it almost systematic, or I found a good process of it, which was like the 3-part training regime, which is mostly through 3 different outings or meetings. First being the onboarding, which is like give you a history of the station and the org and how it works. Fill out the application, kind of make it like an interview where we just kind of assess the person and their needs, where they are, talk to them about themselves. Then part 2 is training in the studio, just how to use it, how to do your show, and other parts of it. And then part 3 is it's actually 4 parts, I guess, but it's the studio training could be the same time as the onboarding, depending on how long they have. But the second part is them shadowing me doing a live show. And then the last one is them starting their show and I'm shadowing them, which I don't count as training. By that point, they're cleared to start their show and I'm just shadowing them which is barely training. It's just something I have to do on my end.
Sure.
It's not an extra meeting
cool,
for
though.
them. So that's why I count as 3. So if I could do that, but for party organizing, I think that would be a good thing, because when it comes to whether it's IWW, unions, and other orgs I've been in, SP2, there's no real training. The training is always informal and unscheduled. It's like we'll have a reading group, so you learn political theory or you do political education, but so piecemeal. There's never a curriculum. It's not like a training course. You'll maybe have a training for, unionizing training from IWW, and it'll be like a Zoom call. One particular lecture or workshop. It can be a real training, but they're like done quarterly. They're done so maybe just once a year or just sometimes. It's not a setup thing, and it's not a regular thing, and it's not you're required to do this if you're going to be a member and participate. I think it is a bit more of a ask, but to get away from volunteerism, where
except if
Oh, shoot. Why is your audio not coming? God. That's annoying. Oh. I can't hear you at all now. What happened there? Huh.
Oh, okay. My mic muted.
Okay. That's good.
I don't know why that
I
happened.
thought something got screwed up again. So, running into the same problem again with the share screen is that I don't have YouTube Premium, so it blanks out the screen every time I am.
We gotta pay, man. We
not
gotta
on
pay the cost. Just like what I'm saying about if you want to do politics in a real way, you gotta pay, and maybe even ask a bit more people. But to know that if you do go through the training and you pay dues, you're going to have rights. You're gonna have responsibilities, but you also gotta have rights. The responsibility is that you're trained, that you know what you're doing, that you, if you go through the minimum amount, you too will be able to start your own organization. So you don't even have to stay with us. That was put out by a Green Party person in their article, where the goal of when someone joins your org, you should immediately start training them so they can start their own org.
Yeah, that's
Meaning community project or anything else, because otherwise people are left hanging on the people in charge. And in all of our volunteer, doing it in my spare time, organizing, it's like, well, don't ask me what you want me to have you do. I want you to figure out that out. Or, oh, you want us to do this? Well, help us do it. But that's not co-creating and co-ownership. So dues is the means of it is a bit of inclusionary, because the usual thing that comes up in Occupy in any horizontal or anarchist org is if you require dues, that's going to gatekeep. You're gatekeeping people out based on ability to pay. We'd be no different than a capitalist business. I'm like, bullshit. A capitalist business takes your money and you have no rights or responsibilities, except maybe a consumer rights to return the product. Maybe. Mm-hmm. No, in this case, you pay dues, but you have voting power. You have the ability to decide what's happening. That's something you don't get in a capitalist business or a nonprofit, for that matter. You have no rights when you volunteer time, and it's the opposite. You're signing a document, signing away your rights. To say if something goes wrong, you can't sue us, or you can't speak about this business that we're doing.
Yeah.
Or, when you donate money, you're just giving it. There's no contract there to ensure that your money is going to something good or something valuable, or it's not just going to be wasted or disappear.
Yeah.
As it does. And then later they got to say, well, we didn't have a proper treasurer, or the treasurer resigned. So we're basically starting from square one because we didn't have some shared, books. So when the treasurer resigns, it's like everything they were doing goes with them. This sucks. And I'm seeing it everything I'm involved with. And you need some, like in the unions, local union chapters, like you need the state treasurer to basically watch and oversight all the locals and their spending.
Mm-hmm.
They have to do all. They have to be their own, have audit officers and a
Mm-hmm.
whole committee for auditing,
Yeah.
just to
Well,
ensure that because they're dealing with 50 grand.
Yep.
Some chapters, they're well moneyed. At least they can afford a good pizza party now and then. But again, that's all. They're only allowed to spend 30% of what they take in on the membership. The rest has to go to leadership. You know, it's required to go to leadership. And that's how DSA works. You know, God, they give 30% of their dues back to the locals. SP only doesn't give anything back. I was shocked when I learned this because I just joined SP and started paying dues, which is on a yearly basis. It's just a lump sum every year. And when I go to the first meeting and I realize like we're funding our stuff by passing the hat around. Like that shouldn't be. I just paid $100 to this.
Yeah, right.
So that would be a quarter of the rent that we're paying every year. And so it's like, what's my money going to then? A presidential campaign where our chapter chair is like saying like, yeah, they're half-assing it. They only do everything half-assed. I'm like, oh great.
Yeah.
You know, they could just endorse Stein,
right.
but you're not going to do that. You announced your own candidate, but the candidate isn't really campaigning. They're doing a media campaign. If anything, they're posting.
Who is the candidate, by the way?
2 women. You could look it up, but I don't really care since even my local doesn't care.
All right.
We're doing fundraisers for other causes, maybe a reading group, a quarterly movie showing. We watched Chuds last quarter.
Yeah.
That's
cool.
Which is a 80s B horror movie.
Oh, yes.
And it was quite entertaining, sort of. Kind of bored at parts.
I've never seen it,
but it all takes place within one neighborhood of Lower Manhattan.
Right.
And being the 80s, it's really rough. Like half of the people in this neighborhood are homeless. or rather, there's it's a commentary on like homeless being disposed of. No one cares about them. Like they're living in the underground and they're getting eaten by the monsters.
Yeah.
And the monsters are mutated from toxic waste disposal.
There's a cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
Yes. But that's the acronym that throws you off. That's the red herring acronym.
Oh.
The real acronym is chemical uranium urban disposal unit.
Oh, interesting.
Or the U is urban and the D is disposal. So it's actually the project of dumping the toxic waste under the Bowery. It's the Bowery. Yeah, the Bowery. Because apparently that's cheaper than moving it out of the city. But why? What was it doing in the city? or it's just saying that the government, it was cheaper for them to dump it underground under the Bowery. Because New York City is such a wasteland now, I guess. But it's interesting that like the main, I won't get into it. Anyway, let me bring up my because I was gonna wrap up my just explanation of training people at the radio station, and that's part I've been enjoying the last half year. All DJs, by the way, who stepped up to just ask, could I have a show on the station? So our outreach was not bringing in any new content. No, we could say, oh, the outreach is for finding support financially, but we weren't outreaching for underwriting. We kind of were, but we weren't following up in that regard. So what was the point? What is the point? But the kind of onboarding so I'm kind of leaning towards requiring anyone who wants to be a member should go through some trainings, or I suggested heavily, like, and have them. So I'll start with it being voluntary, I guess, and see what kind of interest. But I think if you're going to go out, sometimes the training comes in the form of posting when you have canvassing days, and it's whoever shows up is getting trained. And because again, it's all volunteer and memberless, and then so I'm going to get into that with this onboarding and how we want the Greens and any org that I'm a part of. I want it to be clear who's in and who's out, because if you're in, because like the station, I liked this aspect. There was a lot of buy-in for the people participating. Because you had producers who were using the station, they were being producers, making content. They were working, 10 to 20 hours a week. That's the kind of volunteer hours a political org would love to have.
Absolutely.
And they were doing something they liked, sort of a hobby, but to be able to do this, the requirement was you'll be trained. You want to do this right, correct? And the same goes for anyone who's interested in the Greens or just acting politically. It's like, look, if you want to act politically correctly or better, then we're going to require you to be training if you're going to be a part of this. So, but I guess sort of the thing that's missing, though, my hesitancy and a lot of volunteer orgs is that if you're going to require dues and whatever, there needs to be something you get out of it, besides just feeling good. Or if it's a party, the ability to participate in electing, in the case of Democrats, it's electing who's going to be the government.
Yeah.
And we want to be that. We want to get to that point. Or it's the community projects, deciding which ones we're going to do and who we support with the money you're contributing. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to be a part of this decision-making process, you need to be educated. You get some basic political education, at least from our perspective, eco-socialist. Learn what the eco-socialist Green New Deal is. So that's the lecture portion. The discussion topic, which is what we'll do right now. And part 3 is canvassing or meeting your neighbors, or the almost like an independent study thing where it's like you organize something in your neighborhood, and I'll be doing it with you. Yeah. And it would be something to keep up with if say I have 3 people at once doing this, but that would be a true test of my skills, my ability to multitask, I guess. But it would be the good thing because I know that I'm helping other people do these things. And once they do it once, they might be able to do it any time. Or they'll have some more confidence. Otherwise, it's a tyranny of the active, or a tyranny of those with free time. That's what all of these nonprofits and volunteerism stuff kind of boils down to.
Yeah.
Or it's you get a tyranny or the hierarchy of separation of technical knowledge, division of labor, creates these inequalities, which Paracom goes into. We've covered that. And that's something a lot of these orgs don't factor in. They don't. If they read Paracom and included the balanced job complex, that's also what's a lot missing from a lot of these community economic stuff. It doesn't take. Yeah, it doesn't address that. Okay, so local onboarding. So the first part of it would be going over the 10 key values of the Green Party. They are our assumptive statements, and they include our applied goals. So these are the things we kind of take for granted. Values are used to approve or argue for platform planks. Most other considerations are related to optics, considerations of the values, weighing the reaction or opinions of the general public against potential audiences and populations we are focused on for recruitment. So this is how when we make decisions, we're either using values as a guidepost or we're using optics, which I'm not a fan of, but it is consistently happening. Like my favorite example is we were debating adding in a plank on the state Green Party for banning or phasing out zoos, because all zoos are animal torture, at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And with the alternative of nature conservancies and parks and whatnot. So it's not like there's no way we can have public amenities to watch animals, but they shouldn't be zoos. And there was a woman, boomer type, who was like, "No, we can't have that. We'll all look like crazy kooks." And I'm like, not really. If you're under 30, you don't like zoos like the older generation, and maybe you like zoos when you're under 9, but as soon as you hit puberty, you realize how unfair it is. For whether it be the orcas or or the cute animals that are in cages, just think about that. And you have those, and was it the nature safaris? Aren't really much better. It's just a larger cage, but it's still a freaking cage, and you got all the cars driving around. It's not good for them. So anyway, number 1, key value 1, grassroots democracy. All human beings must be allowed. And by the way, these are my really short versions. They're usually like a full paragraph, each of these. So I try to summarize them down to like 2 sentences. One being like, what is the value? And 2, like, what would be the goal, the applied goal? So all human beings must be allowed to have a say in decisions that affect their lives. No one should be subject to the will of another. Improve public participation in every aspect of government and seek to ensure accountability of public representatives. Ergo, expand participatory democracy. Key value 2, social justice and equal opportunity. All persons must have the opportunity to benefit equally from the resources afforded to us by society and the environment under the law. I put in because there's some sentence relating to within legal frameworks. Second part of this value is to confront personal and structural discrimination. The current list that we use is race, class, gender, sexual orientation, age, nationality, religion, and ability. One application is under the rubric of not discriminating based on age. There was a 16-year-old who ran for the nomination of presidency in 2016. He was a Floridian who is now probably some Democrat on a city council now. It looked like he was kind of being opportunistic, but he started with this. Maybe I could look him up to see what he's doing now, but I don't care now. But at the time, he was arguing like, look, it's discrimination based on age to say I can't run for the nomination. But of course, we're all kind of like shrugging like, yeah, but you can't legally be president, so there's that discrimination. But that doesn't mean we have to discriminate against you. We'll allow you to be, run in our primary, as in participate in forums, to go to the events, that kind of thing. That was the compromise. Value 3, ecological wisdom. Human societies are not separate from nature. Stop. Maintain an ecological balance within resource limits. Develop a sustainable society where future generations will benefit. And I think we included 7 generations out or something. Employ regenerative agriculture, energy efficient economy, which is one of those like loaded words. Some of the words are loaded as far as like they were picked because they ruffled the least feathers, energy efficient versus say net zero economy. Mm-hmm. We put energy efficient economy, lifestyles that respect the integrity of natural systems. Key value 4 is non-violence. This always kind of, anyway, I'll get into the conflicts later. Key value 4 is nonviolence. We must develop effective alternatives to current patterns of violence. Recognize the need for self-defense and the defense of others. So that's important there.
That's an important caveat, yes.
Important caveat.
Mm-hmm.
Demilitarize and eliminate WMDs. We promote nonviolent methods of opposition, meaning no direct action. Or if you do direct action, that's not our values.
It's not us, yeah.
Yeah. So there's always that like, well, I kind of want to support anti-fascists, Oh no, we have to disown them. Put out a statement. Take actions toward peace on all levels. Value 5. Here's one of the contentious ones. Decentralization. Centralization of wealth and power contributes to various injustices. That's a very, very broad thing to say. Because it's kind of assuming that it's actually almost assuming a neoliberal, we're all individuals and not a society. It's like centralization of wealth and power contributes to various injustices. But I guess that's regardless of whether it's an individual or a group, or an org, or the state, or the society. But that's where the contention lies. Like, what if it's centralization within the whole society? Anyway, restructure society's institutions away, controlled by the few, with less bureaucracy. Keep as much decision-making as possible at individual and local levels, assuring civil rights and protection. So you kind of get into that libertarian territory with this. Value 6, community-based economics. So I consider this value to be, if you agree with the first 3, then significant economic reform is needed. So this value is a statement of what kind of reform. Redesigning work structures, mode production, for employee ownership and workplace democracy. Develop new economic activities and institutions, which would be the mode of production, with humane, liberatory, ecological, responsive, and accountable use of technology. Establishing basic economic security for all, period. So that leaves it very open to how. So the debate is basic income or guaranteed income or guaranteed job. Move towards cooperative and democratic definitions of work, jobs, and income. I think I added those quotes. But it's based on my summary of the paragraph. Includes social labor in the system of income distribution. Restrict size and power of corporations without discouraging positives. So that caveat is where the Big Ten approach of the Greens, which I'll get into with the history, is to allow liberals and SOC Dems to be included. So when these values were written, they were part of that. And so that's where it's like, well, we do want small business owners. We want a community. A small business owner is a community-minded. It's like, no.
I mean,
really.
not often.
Tell that
But, yeah.
Have you met restaurant owners? Okay. They own 3 restaurants in the area.
Yeah.
And they're not sure if it's wise to force them to, this is a local thing, countywide, to require providing the salary range when you post a job. I was reading an article where one was quoted about like, well, that's, if I hire someone for more or less, that will make the first person I hired feel bad.
Yeah. Yeah, can't have that.
So number 7, feminism and gender equity. We have inherited a social system based on male domination. The processes of deciding our actions are equally important as achieving outcomes. So it's kind of interesting that the feminist value is the one where we say the means are as important as the ends. So we are not taking, are you care about the means or do you care about the ends? We say they're both are important. Replace cultural ethics of domination and control with cooperation and respect of differences. I like that line because it makes it clear that when we talk about patriarchy or toxic masculinity, we're really just talking about a certain set of ethics that is not inherent to masculinity or men.
Yeah.
That's what is being fought against when you are being feminist.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish that was made clearer all the time, because usually the first thing to say when feminists speaking is about men. It's like, don't make it about men. Make it about ethics of domination and control. Last sentence is values of gender equity, interpersonal responsibility, and honesty are developed with moral conscience. Kind of a fluff line, if you ask me, but I mean, again, that's my summary of a few sentences. So, okay, value 8: respect for diversity. In parentheses, I put cultural, ethnic, racial, sexual, religious, and spiritual. Those the modifiers, adjectives used. Diversity is important to promote the development of respectful relationships across the human spectrum. Reflect diverse elements of society and organizations and decision-making bodies. Of course, do you do that with requirements, with what is it called? The college admissions stuff.
You mean like quotas? That sort of
Quotas,
thing?
that's a word, quotas. Do you do that with quotas, or you just assume that if everyone has equal access and opportunity, then you'll get that diversity, which is a thing. Supported somewhat. Prioritize leadership of people traditionally closed out of such roles. So do a progressive stack or a progressive quota. But we keep it at just when it comes to leadership, have mostly, they always have at least 2 executives, and one must be male, one must be femme. One must be masc, one must be femme.
Yes.
Presenting or identifying.
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't biologically based, okay? I was actually confused about that when the TERF showed up. Made themselves a presence. And I'm like, wait, do we care about biological sex? I'm not sure if I do or not, but they're definitely making a case I shouldn't with their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, on with the next paragraph of this is reflect diverse elements. Prioritize leadership of people traditionally closed out of such roles. Period. Respect all life forms and increase preservation of biodiversity. So diversity includes a diversity of all
things. Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting line to add in there, so that to just say this value of diversity is not just human diversity.
Right.
But it's limited to that one sentence, actually. Value 9: personal and global responsibility. So we seek to join in fostering peace, economic justice, and health. And the health requires what? And the health? I have to rewrite that. But this requires to join with people in organizations around the world. Individuals must act to improve their personal well-being and enhance ecological and social harmony. So this is summarize the motto of think global, act local. And value 10: future focus and sustainability, which is, yes, separate from the ecological wisdom. Because I guess you can care about your steady state economy now, but what does it mean if it's still not future focused? So you have to be future focused too. So it's a way of balancing that out, especially with the diversity of thought we have. Our actions and policies should be motivated by long-term goals. Protect valuable natural resources. Safely dissolve or reuse all waste created. Develop a sustainable, and by the way, there's a few sentences about like waste disposal in there. I think that reflects what the concerns were in the 80s and 90s, that it was kind of environmentalism was focused on the waste and not the production. I find that interesting, but also how things have shifted in our lives.
Yeah.
That we are not doing things like our parents. We're not just caring about the trash once it's made.
Right.
We are caring about why is there trash.
Yeah.
So
why is the stuff being made in the first place?
But the thing about the key values is like they are not getting changed. I don't know. I think it would be it's our third rail, like talking about changing something about the values, even just a sentence. It's like, look, you don't understand how much time went into just crafting these paragraphs and how much workshopping had to go into it. So that nobody objected. Balance the drive. Okay, so here's where we also kind of keep room for capitalism. Balance the drive for short-term surplus or profits with economic development, tech and fiscal policies responsible for inheriting future generations. The focus of policy is on quality of lives rather than open-ended economic growth. So I like that it's both like supportive of post-capitalist value. It's a post-capitalist value. And I think the line about balancing short-term surplus, and they do use surplus, I just put profits as in parentheses, like, is this what is meant? I'm a little confused because I think I don't have to be confused if I interpret it as there are underdeveloped areas that need development, and that is a type of growth. But then there's a certain point where all demands, if we're demand focused in our economics, there's a point where we stop developing and say we can go steady state now. All needs are met, and we'll produce this much surplus in accordance with how many babies are born and population growth. Or we keep us, we want a little bit of growth for the emergency or whatever. But that goes into what's demanded. So the next page I have is the history overview, which I've culled from the main national website and from a little bit from Wikipedia when you go into, because it clarified some things. Because you see, there was a split in the 90s of sorts, but then they merged somewhat again in the early aughts. But there was, until 2017, a second Green Party org, but it just didn't have any members. It was just like one of the sectarian parties, like the SPL.
Oh, okay.
And they were like the more Trotskyist Greens. But a number of them also joined and merged in. So I'll go into that. And I think anyone joining should know about like how this happened. So summer of 1984, following a decade of activism, a committee was formed to start environmental movement organization. So not explicitly a political party, but they were inspired by the West German Greens and adopted their 4 pillars. So the 4 pillars we have come from the first Green Parties made in the 70s, in the Euro communists. In part, let's see, adopted the 4 pillars and a statement of values, which were the 10 key values, and focus on forming coalition of local and state organizations. In 87, there was a national gathering that where 600 attended, and they kind of set policies. And then a second one in 89 focused on their platform writing, and some consensus on pursuing electoral strategy. So it took a few years just to kind of decide and puzzle out: are we an org that's just, we're all activists here, we're part of the anti-nuke movement or stuff like that? Are we just focused on kind of keeping this movement? Are we movement, or are we electoral org of the movement, which is kind of what we've always been. Early 90s meetings saw the first conflict, particularly over who's a member. The Greens, or the GP USA, was formed out of this, and they advocated or they wanted us to be dues-based party, like a union and labor focused, versus state orgs and election focused groups that then formed the Association of State Green Parties, which then competed for so you had a bunch of state. So in the first few years in the early 90s, you had these forming state chapters, basically state Green Parties. And so on the national level, it was like, well, who is part of this? And so you had these 2 orgs. One was more trot and one was not, in the Big Ten, basically. And also one was more electoral and the other was more for like labor strategy, I guess. And I could talk to Howie about it, but because I think he would probably be in the GPUSA at first. And so they were competing over what the state parties would join and more of them joined the Association of State Green Parties. There are about 40 in all. So a unity. So by the end of the 90s, a unity meeting took place in 2000, which didn't really fully work out. So it didn't officially merge them because they couldn't agree on certain details. But enough happened there about, that about most, if not half, of the GPUSA joined the Associated State Green Party and Association of State Green Parties. So it was kind of half, and so they split. It was like the splitting group split in half about, the ones that want to be hardliners about it, and the half that's like, we've lost this competition between us. Let's join the winning side here. Let's be the let's not be the Mensheviks here. A unity mean. Oh, let's see. Yeah, I went that. So enough folded in 2000. Today we are trying to do both with dual definitions. One for elections, and then the other for organization decisions. I mean by that definitions of membership. If you're just registered, with the state as a voter, or are you a dues paying member? So I think by trying to do both, that's kind of what I mean. That it depends on which state you're in.
Sure.
In New York, I think we're not giving you a vote unless you're a dues paying member, and I think that's the way we're going to go globally. At least we're going to try. Because if you don't, you can have some kook show up and say, "Well, I'm a registered Green and I'm anti-vax, so you should have your statement on the vaccines and the mandates." Well, I mean, it's not following the value of decentralization to be for forced mandates. Like, yes, but there's 3 values about valuing the public welfare, and mandates are about protecting the general welfare. So
kind of supersedes.
It sucks when the values conflict, because they can, depending on
for sure.
But I think it would help if people were actually, if people are paying in the same amount I am, then not the same amount. It's a sliding scale.
Right.
You can pay as little as $1 a month. Okay, let me make that clear. So next part of this is the Nader Leduc. Leduc is a indigenous activist.
Oh, from
Minnesota. They run, and that was Nader's running mate the first 2 times. The first run they did was in '96, and they won 700,000 votes, and they spent about $4,000. In 2000, in their second run, the one that everyone knows about, they gained 3 million votes. All the while, more local runs and wins were occurring. Even a few state reps were elected. The 10 key values were revised to match the formed Global Greens in 2001, which is made up of 72 national parties. But there's a lot more diversity. A lot of Green parties in other countries are social democrats with environmentalist, planks. But, if they get in power, like the Greens in Germany, they have to vote to reopen the coal plants. Yeah. So they're not importing all their energy from Russia or something. They have to play national politics. They become part of the ruling class in a way.
Not always what you want to do, but
so because they're not fully independent, I guess. So then that's those early fights were kind of predicting. Like, look, we want to do when we practice our politics when we're in office. Do we want to be principled opposition where we're voting against pretty much everything, or do we want to compromise and just make things a bit better? Kind of depends on how revolutionary you are. I think whenever I say, if I was ever in office, I might be tempted to just say no to everything to intensify the contradictions of our society. In the same way that the communists and the Nazis did in the Weimar Republic. But maybe that's an example of why you don't do that.
Right.
And you get kind of that where people hate the Republicans if you're a liberal because they say no to everything.
Yeah.
They're intensifying the contradiction of neoliberalism by saying no. Oh, we're not going to vote for this budget. We're not going to raise the debt ceiling. They're saying no. They're being in opposition. And they're not being patriotic Americans. They're traitors by taking the stack. It's very interesting to see that from libs. And how they'll probably say the same of leftists, because sometimes we're thinking the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, we do want to destroy the state, but we also want to expand the social safety net. But we
Mm-hmm.
want to do it on our terms. Next is in the aughts, 2000s, there was a progressive backlash which blunted our growth after Nader's 2001. Nader ran again in 04 and 08, but as independent, no party. So we ran our presidential runs with Cobb and McKinney, were poor showings. Sometimes there was a bit of following a safe state strategy, and I include Obama as a reason why McKinney did poorly. McKinney's a black congresswoman, former Dem though, or maybe she went back. And that was also where it's like the identity crisis of, well, I'll get into it. But wins continue, like mostly in California and Maine. So those are the states where we're strongest. The return of some footing with the Stein-Honkler run in 2012, where we got 500,000. They got 500,000 votes, which was 3 times the result of 08. Various experiments and struggles to resolve various challenges. I put that in as like, this is when we try using multi-county organizations as a way of growing chapters within New York State. So here's a run through of internal conflicts, in no particular order, or I try to be chronological. First is the opportunity to debate and discuss the pros and cons. Okay, so my note here is when doing this with others, create an opportunity to debate or discuss the pros and cons while I cover these. So I want this to be the discussion, political education, like we're in a college class, and explore, especially the person who's joining, how where they stand on these things. Sometimes blamed on ideology, personality, or other issues, factions based on positions develop and resolve, uniting over rejection of centrism. Or that everyone who is agreeing is rejecting centrism. All the extremes are on the same team, as Jay Ray jokes. Early debates in the 80s were over the key values and their meaning. The main factions were social ecology, represented by Bookchin, who is in his prime, and which focuses on human liberation via social and economic justice, versus what was, if you stop me if you've not heard of this, deep ecology, represented by the writer Nass, which focuses on saving the environment via any and all means. So maybe I can tell. We went with social ecology to form the values. And our Green New Deal, eco-socialism is very much flowing from Bookchin and that type of anarchism. Or Marxist, social Marxism. So other meta questions were the principled stand against the status quo versus accommodating to power. Gaining office and saying no to everything, which deepens the crisis but causes mass change, which goes back to Leninism, I think. Or accommodating, which continues the system but improves conditions. There's also a bit of a meta question over, are we for prefiguration movement versus are we a vanguard organization? So there's vanguardists about, which usually makes us a sectarian party, versus a prefigurative movement where we are about passing laws or fighting for laws or campaigning for things that prefigure the next system. Also, the meaning of green economics. Does it mean a regulated capitalism or socialist policies? Are we reform or revolution? I mean, this is a standard Revolutionary Party kind of question, right? It seems like they're resolved by writings like Goldman or what was the other woman? The German woman. There's Goldman and there's the German woman in the 20s. Sorry, it's not getting to me, but she wrote Reform or Revolution and other types of books like that.
Yeah.
But they were written
I
a
don't know what
century
I
ago.
was either. Yeah.
And anything written now is sort of just echoing those questions. And I guess the answer is you do both at the same time. Because even when you do a big revolution, you're doing it so you can carry out the reforms. Sometimes you have to overturn the government just to reform money,
Right.
or something, even something simple like chattel slavery. Their accommodating ethos made these. So in the 90s, in the 90s particularly, there was an accommodating ethos which made these higher level issues moot and assumed the movement focused group, which meaning the Green Party USA, which is movement focused, like we're a party but we're focused and based in the movements, which is kind of a MLM type of thing. We're Vanguard Party of of working people, versus the more accommodating ex-liberal or ex-Democrat, not quite leftist or Marxist, who are more about like, look, these issues are moot to us. We just want to make things a little better. We want to start a composting program, and the only way we know being in a different party will help with this. Because at the moment, in the 80s, the Democrats want to burn garbage, or in the 90s, they're okay with burning garbage, and in the movements want to be able to vote for someone else, and that's why we're forming.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just stick with that. But as I didn't join just so I could vote for something else because of certain issues that may change. Because now Democrats don't want to burn garbage; they just want to ship the trash somewhere else or whatever. And anyway, there's that kind of opposition, but then there's the opposition of like, we're for something a bigger leftist project.
Yeah.
So there was that meta question of, are we a leftist project, or are we just about representing our own views in politics, almost on an individual level, as activists? We're very, very post 60s thing. So current cuts or conflicts are kind of between socialists versus democratic socialists, or social Dems or green liberals. So old leftist questions of use of the state versus anarchist practice. That's kind of another fault line. The 2016 revising of the platform with a compromise of inclusionary language, a transition to post-capitalism, kind of resolved some of these things. But they don't go away. The people who opposed it are kind of, well, yeah, we're post-capitalist, but how long? We're not giving ourselves a timeline of, when you're building, I don't know. It's hard to parse out. I think we need to have a discussion with other leftists in a Zoom call, I think, to explore that stuff. Another is trans rights, as there were a very vocal minority of TERFs who framed things as biological sex-based rights. They wanted to frame women's rights as being sex-based.
Yeah, all tied to sex. Yeah.
Versus the third and fourth wave types of feminism, which focus on gender / social self-identity. Because gender is a social identity. It's socially constructed, but that doesn't mean it's not real. Absolutely. So there is a bit of it actually has a name where you're kind of social realist. It's like, society is a real thing. Mm-hmm. It's almost individualist. But the TERFs were actually, sometimes Marxist, where it's like, to be a true materialist is to reject the socially constructed, which is ideological and idealist. And then, so the only thing that's real is biological sex. But that kind of ignores how things are and how we organize. Right. So anyway, and it's not intersectional either. So other examples of inter-party disagreement pertain to vaccine, and this is currently, vaccine mandates during the pandemic. So they're the values of bodily autonomy, which clash with the values of general welfare and public health. Or there are geological flashpoints like the war in Ukraine, with the fault line being in opposition to U.S. imperialism, represented by support, versus, represented by, this is represented by support or solidarity for Ukrainian self-defense or resistance to escalation, which means not sending support to Ukraine. So there's it's not a big fault line. It was literally like a lot of Greens versus Howie in this. I think Howie was for funding Ukraine for the sake of their self-defense and self-determination, but only funding their defense up to a point where they're defending themselves.
Right.
If it's to hurt Russia and to escalate the conflict, obviously he wasn't for that. But that's how he was being framed by people like Ajamu Baraka and others, who kind of are it's kind of strange how quickly you go from I'm just for no military spending, period. And you either look like, it's like, well, if you don't support our geopolitical position, you must be for Russia's geopolitical position.
Yeah, have to pick a side.
And either they play into that, or they don't, but they rant so much about U.S. imperialism, then the optics are that you are excusing other types of imperialism. When it really should just be, we are just for non-escalation, because any escalation only serves all imperialism, regardless of what nation state it's doing. Some historical context. In crisis, new parties. Okay, so this is separate from that's done with the conflicts. So just the context of why the Green Party, why form in the first place. What are we really trying to accomplish historically? In crisis, new parties form to address what the current government isn't able to address, or an existing major party rejuvenates via grassroots movements. This is what has been attempted to be done in the Democratic Party again and again and again. The Greens were started particularly by activists who attempted to rejuvenate the Democrats in 1972. The hippies elected a candidate that was against the war and was more liberal, and they bought it against Nixon, mostly because all of those conservative Democrats said, I'm not voting for Humphrey. I'm going to vote for Nixon out of spite, despite these young assholes who want to end the war and either grow out their hair and blah, blah, blah. So you kind of got, they showed their true colors. The Democratic Party was, a conservative party, capitalist party.
Yeah. And
you try to do something else within it, and it just blows up because it's not your party. Yeah. You're not rejuvenating the party because they found out the hard way in the 70s. And, the 70s are the dark age in this way, for activism and leftism. It's like so many quit or dropped out or did enough drugs and killed themselves because things just fell apart so fast because they tried to rejuvenate the Dems, because that's what everything kind of coalesced into being, all the 60s movements. And so that failed. You got this dissemination of like, okay, we have to be decentralized. We're going underground, where we got to act locally. And so no left power, left power just dwindles. So the Green Party was started out of these remnants to have their own thing, electoral party. So the U.S. has, to use kind of the Kronstadt wave kind of thing, the U.S. history kind of has a 40-year cycle with this. First, the anti-federalists, then the Republicans, then the populists, then there is kind of a rejuvenation of the Democrats with the Socialist Party and the New Deal coalition. And since the 70s, there was kind of a big shift, with the Republican Revolution and whatever. And then the 2010s, so like if they're following a 40-year cycle, like what was happening here. And so in the 2010s, you do have this attempted rejuvenation of the party, of the Dems. And just as in the 60s or the 70s, there was this attempted rejuvenation. It didn't work because there wasn't a third opposition party like the Populists or the Republicans or the Anti-Federalists. These were separate new parties. So the Greens were started back, post 70s, but the energy hasn't been for third party politics or a new party. So these shifts have been tried every 40 years, and they shift politics in some ways. There's tons of ink spilled about it. Bernie revolution, the existence of Bernie-crats, but not really changing the status quo. So yeah, so maybe another 40 years it will be the Green Party's turn. In the 2040s, that's when the shit really hits the fan with climate change. And by then it won't be just the Green Party, it will be the Green Left Party, or it will be the eco-socialist.
Eco-socialist.
Maybe we'll change our name.
Mm-hmm.
So Green Parties were formed in response, something the current governments of the 60s weren't. So the Green Parties formed in the 70s and 80s to respond to ecological damage, and environmental regulation has now become the norm. So they did have an effect, globally speaking. Whether or not it's applied or effective is another matter. But when a corporation commits ecological damage, sometimes they pay a fine. And that's the progress that, we've had. Because before 1970, people dumped waste in every stream, in the local stream, literally.
Yeah.
At least that was stopped. That's a big change.
Rivers don't catch on fire
We
too
got
much
to applaud
anymore.
our elders.
Uh-huh.
So climate crisis requires a larger change. So since 2010, the purpose has shifted to economic reform and more radical change. Because I think it's only in 2020 that we get the slogans like system change, not climate change, and the return of eco-socialist politics, with trying to get that platform. And it's the growing and largest faction of the Greens, or at least the agenda is an eco-socialist one. And that shift is from 2010. While others shifted to the Dems as Bernie-crats, we were shifting internally. Just to show, and that was my way of I was thinking through have we changed as a party between our founding and now, and that's what I could come up with. So this is from a separate article from the National Green website. It was written in 2003, but as you might guess, only about one or two of these challenges isn't a factor anymore. The rest are still our challenges. So the first is literally label relationship with nature.
Huh.
But I will underline it as our relationship with celebrities.
Yeah.
So there's three sides that were fighting it out in 2000 or post 2000, particularly after 2000, because we were getting that. It was assumed that more and more progressives would join us as we started winning races. Our growth was in getting more progressives over. After 2000, because of that, we kind of grew too fast almost in getting over 3 million votes. We put fear in the status quo, and they struck back hard. And they convinced a generation or two of progressives that we are the enemy, that we cause Republican victories, and that we are the cause of it's all the crimes of the Bush administration. It's all Nader's fault. I have a song.
You have a song?
Yeah. It's 9/11 happened, and Saddam. We went after Saddam in Iraq. All because I voted for Ralph Nader. And it kind of goes on and on. It's now colored-coded warnings pervade our very thought. All because I voted for Ralph Nader. The fires will rage across the Middle East, and we never will have peace. All because I voted for Ralph Nader. Okay. And we can revise it to Trump, and it's all Stein's fault. So it's what rhymes with Stein. No updated song like that. Actually, it's weird. But they did it again. You know, when the Democrats lose big, they blame us. So progressives are. Anyway, that's number 2 actually. So number 1 is our relationship. The 3 sides were, because this is with the assumption, and it's a fine assumption. Data backs this up, sort of, that when we run celebrities, we get more notoriety and we do grow and get more attention, and that leads to more votes. So we gain ballot status with a big celebrity candidate, and that gives us more votes and we grow. Side 2 is we don't endorse celebrities and we don't give them space because celebrities are usually narcissists. So we should be growing under our own power. And side 3 is we support celebs if they join and support the party. This removes the negative optics of us looking like opportunists riding on the coattails of celebrities, while creating the positive optics of, look at us, we have celebrities joining our organization because they believe in mass working class party. Mm-hmm. They're class traders. If they're celebrities that are separate from the party, then they're not class traders, and we are being the class traders by supporting them. Yeah. This was so the Nader thing. So the third choice was what we settled on. So this is 03. By 04, there was a consensus about path 3. And Nader said, showing sort of his colors, no, I'm not going to join the party. I have to be a party of one. That is the only way I have integrity. And or freedom.
From some,
we went over this before. It's what I read about. But it also goes with any celebrity that kind of wants to
that's what I'm saying.
Look good by being an outsider or whatever. It's like, well, will you be a member? Will you register? Yeah. As green, just register. That's all we required, and he wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Sounds a lot like Cornel West. And
so did and it again repeated with Cornel West exactly. Because he'd have to do politics internally.
That's right. He's a jazz man.
He's a jazz man, but not a jazz orchestra. He won't be in a jazz orchestra.
No, of course not.
That would be the compromise to me, and so the first group was like let Ralph be Ralph, and that's what, and that's just I don't like that let blank be blank, let Trump be Trump, let Biden be Biden, let him be a gaffe machine, and that's what people like about him, and I get it to an extent, but then he's the president, and then the folksiness doesn't wears thin fast. And this repeated again. This argument came up again in a lesser extent, but it was the faction or the groups that were the support that Roseanne Barr gained in 2012, but she sought our nomination. This came up again. So now it wasn't a pioneering corporate activist, Ralph Nader. Now it was someone who's sort of an activist, but an actor and entertainment person. So a real celebrity and a narcissistic.
Oh my God! Quick sidebar on that. Have you seen her recent speech at TPUSA conference?
I know of it, but not the content, because there usually isn't much content.
No, it literally wasn't. It was mostly just her screaming catchphrases again and again to like scattered applause.
That's all she is.
Yeah.
She and the thing is, she isn't. And maybe we can, if we ever get video, ever able to do videos, again, maybe we'll watch some of her first interviews when she started running and the kind of content she had. So it was not this. It's not the same strength as Nader, but there was a group, because I was watching clips or seeing things where the case for Roseanne Barr was the case of like, we need a celebrity to grow the party. Like, not if she's not going to join. Not if she is going to be Zionist. Because, 2012, we're always, what's leftists, we're ahead of the curve, when it comes to like, look, we're for Palestine. And she thought we were crazy. So now number 2, the ambivalence or even the opposition of progressives. Generally, the section of voters or thought leaders or media with the emotional connection. Oh, sorry. So I wrote this. It's not. I didn't write this like it's something I'm going to read out, but it's more like a summary. But progressives, I'm referring to the section of voters or thought leaders or media which happen to have an emotional connection to the Dems or a commitment to defensive voting, which is the usual inter-left argument online about voting electoralism. Are you a defensive voter? Would you have those are the 2 reasons why anyone's really a Dem to me who's a leftist or even left-leaning. Progressive. They have emotional commitment. They're a defensive voter, maybe both. Emotional connection is like, well, my parents were Dems, and Dems are just the party of working people, blah, blah, blah. It's my home politically or something. Right. They feel like a connection, or they have a relationship with Dems in office on the local level. So they may hate everything about the national level, but it's like they'll still be like, well, or it's the reverse, where they're defensive voters when it comes to the national level, and locally they're emotionally connected because, like, well, the Dems that I helped get elected, progressives like me, it's a good thing, and I'm only able to do that as a Dem. Never mind that they're part of and supporting the status quo that is destroying the planet and us on the national level.
Right.
So they're trying to have both ways, and I think they're hypocrites for that. General observation is that they are not that many, but via journalism and the media professions, they hold a share of the global national mindscape. In practice, they accommodate the ruling class via the Democratic Party and then get sidelined or collaborated. The goal that we could have or must have is to provide and grow our own sources of political opinion to compete or counter mainstream framing, to shift audiences towards independent politics as the Dems continue their inability to act on anything worthwhile. So that's why it's always really painful and frustrating to me when I see the independent left fall into the narratives of defensive voting and the Democratic Party. Even when they're, being oppositional, they also have it both ways, because when it comes to the national level, they're defensive voting. They're still going to vote for Biden or Hillary. They're still going to advocate against any independent politics.
Mm-hmm.
That really sucks. Number 3 is media snubbing. Challenge number 3. We're in a constant struggle. So this part of the article was mostly about getting into debates, but it also goes for being included in polling in the first place. It goes for being covered by mainstream or even independent media, though usually independent media in the local or regional context will cover you, as they did me. I got even by the corporate paper, I got covered. But I wouldn't be included in debates or forums. Right. Well, there was the case where there was the Democratic primary, which is the election in Albany, and I was included in forums that were independently organized by the League of Women Voters, or the one was the Environmental Forum or something. So if it's some local group, you can kind of get in the door. But if there was a one Democratic primary debate where we weren't included, or maybe I was thinking of no, it was the same year, but it was the one that was televised. That's the difference. The televised one will be the one you have to fight to get in, or to be considered to go in. But they'll basically say, well, this is for the Democratic primary and you're not a Democrat. Then there's but there won't not be a televised general election debate, because you don't matter, you don't poll enough. I'm like, well, there wasn't a poll. or I wasn't included in the poll. And then you call up the people who do the polling, and you ask them, why don't you include me or Howie Hawkins in the statewide poll? And they go like, well, you're just not. There's not enough interest.
Right. It's a big
We're not asking
catch-22.
because nobody knows who Howie Hawkins is.
Right.
So it would be a waste of our time. They're kind of right, but it's also really fucking stupid. And
It is stupid.
Perpetuating. So that's what we're kind of up against. So we're always in a constant struggle to get in debates, which sometimes become the headline. We make the headline about the debate to be our struggle to get in, like Stein being arrested at Hofstra. But again, that's news to activists. It's not mainstream news. But over time, it kind of has been a losing game across the board. That's my comment, because there have been struggles where this guy speaking from 2003 says, like, we fight and we're setting the groundwork to get included, to get better coverage next time. Well, either there isn't a next time or there was, and you didn't still get any coverage. In fact, you will get less, because then being that you fought and got a little bit of attention, the powers that be or the other Democrats, the duopoly will move to make sure that you don't get any attention next time, which is sort of what happened with Howie Hawkins. In 2020, he was complete media blackout. And Stein's being interviewed sometimes, but again, it's not like her campaign is being covered step by step like Trump or Biden.
Right.
Which sucks, because it does matter. The more media exposure you get, the more people can pay attention to you.
Yeah.
And that was sort of was something that dragged on Bernie's campaign even. His campaign would have been doing a lot better, and a constant complaint from the online independent media, left media, was that Bernie wasn't getting the same coverage. CNN wasn't giving fair coverage. MSNBC was barely, they would be condescending about their coverage. Not real mainstream coverage. They show Trump's empty podium in 2016 versus a Bernie speech.
Right.
So challenge number 4, which is the one that's usually focused on the most, actually, is the winner-take-all elections. A real or perceived ambiguity about how hard that we support progressive proportional representation, or IRV. I keep forgetting what that stands for.
IRV.
So there's an argument over which kind of reform to pursue. Instant runoff voting. Or ranked ballots, ranked choice ballots.
Yeah.
And an argument which reform to pursue, at least to me, I'm always unsure which, because proportional representation is like so far away. It's like no one's thinking about it. Ranked choice ballots are kind of what people are, nonpartisan people are willing to fight for.
Right.
So if we're going to do any reform, it's going to be that one.
Mm-hmm.
Though I feel proportional representation would be better, and I think it would get more nonpartisan, no party people involved with that. Though maybe not, because you still need to be in a party. No, actually, no, you don't. If a percentage, it is party based. In order to get a percentage of the vote and for it to matter, you have to be a slate of candidates. You have to be in a group of candidates, a party. It's not going to be individually based, but that if you do follow-up questions on the third of Americans that are now no party, or it's actually more than that.
No, it's more than that.
It's 50. It's half. It's 50%. They want to vote based on, like, I want to take every candidate in their own merits, and you can't do that with parties. They don't trust parties. So ranked choice ballot is workable with individualized candidates. Proportional representation isn't. At least I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, right.
So that's why ranked choice ballot is sort of the one that we are left with building a coalition for.
Yeah.
So besides the voting system, there is the funding of campaigns. Data is that when we have it, based on our own campaigns, is that our spending is not exactly correlated to vote totals, but lack of money is an obstacle. You have to spend a certain amount to have a campaign. But when it comes to, there have been times where someone has run for office, with varying amounts of money. Sometimes they've done it with a little amount, and then the next time they fundraise 10 times that amount, and they had public financing. And then they do worse. And you can factor in, was it a midterm election year? From cycle to cycle, has the attitudes of the voting public shifted because of Trump being elected? There's all that kind of stuff. So we can't pin down whether or not it matters if we spend or not. But it's not a one-to-one. It's kind of interesting, but it also depends on what you spend the money on. And I think at least the conclusion we can draw is you spend it on lit and paying canvassers, not commercials or ads or whatever. And that's cheaper. You don't need 10,000. Well, I say pay canvassers, I at least have lit for canvassers. Or yard signs or whatever. Though yard signs are also one of those things where there's no strong data to suggest that they matter. They just remind those who are engaged that you're running, and they're kind of a morale booster to see more of your signs on private lawns. They don't act like advertisements, by the side of the road. They're mostly just a lot of garbage at the end of the day. And so the printers do well. It's like, they're a little cottage industry. I think that was the studies I saw about signage, its effect. So challenge 5 is, this is put as a challenge to the party in general, but it's also a challenge. Challenge for the party or of the party. Decentralization versus centralization. There is a contradiction of values with the former being decentralization, the value of that, and community economics. Now, this is my comment, I think. To have a workable community economics, period. But that's its own thought that I've said. To have a commons, it needs to be, you're centralizing ownership into an entity. How it's managed could be very much decentralized. So anyway, but this is actually relating to the party itself, the org. But actually, you could say about any org. To have a workable fundraising, media relations, operations, and support needs a strong center. For the National Party to have an office in D.C. to resolve inter-org problems. If there's a beef between state chapters or whatever, that you need a strong center to do that. Not only to just lay down the law, but to even act as a mediator. Because you will have in anarchist spaces, like, you can't come in and tell me what to do. Don't enforce your mediation process on me, man. Like, hey, we're just trying to help. Yeah, but I'm not going to consent to it. The Marxist Project fell victim to this. They wanted to do the least amount of centralizing so they could better support their member orgs. And that required having registered member orgs pay dues, basically. And you had a bunch of these, and most of these orgs are like anarchist or community mutual aid projects. And they basically said, no, we're just going to split. We're going to dissolve this coalition rather than do that. It was so fucking sad. The left is pathetic, if it exists. Say it exists. Or it doesn't, because it's pathetic in this way. So to have conflict resolution, which is one of those, values of the commons, or the means of managing commons from Ostrom. So the general concern and resistance, though, why the value of decentralization is so important, is a very early and commitment to opposing the iron law of oligarchy, which is to resist any separation or stratification of division of labor, which then creates a hierarchy of authority, or to avoid any hierarchies of authority. Unlike most groups, though, and this is where we resolve this, by retaining decentralization. So we have a centralized dues, let's say, but decentralized in that, unlike most groups, the locals get half of their dues back. DSA gives 30 or less. Many don't at all. And there's a lot of different forms of representation in the higher levels. For example, it was a compromise early on that we create identity caucuses, which have the same voting power as the state parties, because many of the state parties, you might guess, were a lot of white people. So we basically have identity caucuses, so that there's a black caucus, so black people can vote on the national level and be represented. Latinx, the Lavender, the Women's Caucus. Those were important, and they have the same voting power. And anyone, and they act at large, so wherever you are in the country, you can join these caucuses, and based on their membership, they get more votes. And that means like I don't think you double dip though, where you either choose to say the identity caucus will have my vote in the national, my representative, my delegate in the convention, versus the state party, will get my vote will go to the delegate there. Because what's the point? It's all white people, or something like that. Middle class hippie, like ex hippies. So that's how we're working it. There's again, it's an ongoing challenge, and sometimes the fault lines of like eco-socialist and what kind of politics we're doing is based on like, well, how strong do we want a national party to be? But for the most part, the state parties are vested with most of the power. And there's something to be said for like, we're organized on the state level, because that's the level. Well, we'll get to that actually. Which I think is the next one. Oh, that's right. No, I guess that's the last one. Yeah. But there's a general issue where we are playing by the status quo's game in the ruling class. They determine the rules of engagement in elections. Yep. So, and how we organize as a party. Actually, that's right. I get into that with the last part. Let's see if I can finish this. So challenge 6 is slide to bureaucracy. The organization itself is a type of challenge, when you have anarchist politics or leanings. The need for structured coherence versus the spontaneity and innovation required by activism. Mass individualism is in tension with having community standards and accountability. We are always weighing the balance between the rules and policy of being in an org and the freedom of autonomy of the action of members. Challenge 7, office holding and the undertow of compromise. Learning from other national Green parties where electoral success and staying in power turns us into the ruling class that enforces or continues the status quo. Or we consistently be oppositional. We distrust power, but we also want to have it. A constant review is then, we need to always constantly review the why and when we compromise, and stay connected to grassroots and other radical positioning, so we stay fresh and brash. The means of doing this is to ensure that we are a membership party, and our membership is made up of activists who are constantly doing on the ground campaigning and activism, which means we're kind of always doing double duty, which is a challenge. It leads to burnout. Or we have membership who aren't the active, management of the party, but the members are the movement people, the activists. If BLM wasn't a separate nonprofit that then gets co-opted by the Dems, if everyone in BLM became a Green Party member, they'd be voting for our policies. They'd be voting. They'd have decision-making power, and their money would provide the funding base for candidates. So we would have actual police reform candidates that would do it, instead of Dems that, say much and do little, or the opposite.
Yeah.
Um, Another challenge, and this is brought up by Cornel West recently, is diversity. We are intensely self-critical about our party makeup. And by the way, it hurts when Cornel West talked about this because it's like it makes it seem like we don't care about how majority white we are. It's like, look, if we have a fierce self-criticism, like we're always doing a struggle session about how to diversify the party. An early move was, and this was done in the early aughts or whatever it is, to have identity-based caucuses with voting power and national decisions. And we have a gender parity rules, the ones that I mentioned before. So progress is made year to year, but it is always not enough for many people. They're always going to say, look, this isn't the Black Panthers. It's not all black or it's not black. It's interesting. Blacks are, as a percentage of Americans, are still, they're 20%.
I don't think they're even that. I think they're more like 12%. But yeah.
Right. So, like, if 12% of our membership, 1 out of 10 is black, that's not underrepresentation. That is representative. So that's kind of my...
Yeah, it might not be locally representative, though, because especially if you're talking about, like...
well, no, in our local chapter, we'll usually have, if we get up to 10 people, we'll have one person who's black.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like, maybe what is the makeup of Albany, though, compared to the country
yes.
as a
well, we were the regional chapter, so if anything, the percentage of blackness was even less. We were a very white area.
Oh, okay. No, then hey, that's not bad, actually.
And Hispanics are not that. There's a number of Hispanics, and they're growing, and there are outnumbering blackness. But yeah, we weren't recruiting Hispanics. So, and then I think the Latinx caucus is our smallest. I don't know. I don't know the numbers. But yeah, there's some deficits. But actually, if you go to California, I think it's probably balanced. But again, we could be balanced with a representation of national or local population, and it still wouldn't be enough because it's like it doesn't look like we're hitting quotas.
Yeah, right.
Because we don't have them. We decided not to have quotas. 9, global connections. So there was a tightrope of projecting our stance on international relations. Oh, sorry. So the global connections thing is not our connection with global greens, which I would consider a challenge too, because so many of them are accommodationists and whatever. But this is just about our international politics, international relations, foreign policy. The tightrope of projecting our stance on international relations, which is that of nonviolence, peacemaking. We are operating in an empire. While we are operating, we are, in the hegemon versus the other green parties in the world. But we are operating in the empire that dominates others. We seek to communicate security through international cooperation in the face of constant attacks. And you can tell this is written in 2003. Constant face of attacks and general nationalism, the nationalist opinion in the public. We are labeled as weak and unpatriotic or traitors. So this is in the context of the Iraq War in 2003, where the peace movement seemed to be sizable, but going by polling, it was 9-1 for the war.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Hard to know if it was like people who say they go to church, were they really for the war? So many people now say they weren't. They're all liars,
I mean, there was so much Islamophobia pushing all that at the time. So,
yes. And the nationalism, and you're not a patriotic American if you're not for the troops and you're not for getting justice for 9/11. And we weren't for that because we knew it was a big mistake and it was all a lie.
Yep.
Anyway, number 10, last challenge, is, and this is probably the one I probably think about the most, actually, because the rest are overcome if you can make the case. And here's where I have trouble making the case. The dual burden of postmodern politics. We, as Greens or as active or as leftists, it's you and me, We seek to contest power within a moribund political system that most don't support. What makes you think maybe more people would be for revolution, but people are also really antsy and or pathologized against it. So you can consider that the system is broken if you want to fix problems, or it's fixed if you want to break it open. We also seek to restore confidence in the political party as a vehicle of change. But among others, there is widespread disengagement in formal democracy, first with the party, a major party or otherwise, then from voting altogether. This is, over the 90s and 80s, referred to as the loss of civic consciousness and the fragmentation of culture. So I put this as a general problem of postmodern politics, because it's everything. And everyone understands this. It's not just party politics, but it affects it. It's hard to make a case for anything when people are so jaded and cynical.
Yeah.
So in the 2010s, America has become polarized. But to what end? So people don't believe in the system or aren't disengaged from formal democracy, meaning bourgeois politics or electoral politics. But they're also disengaging more from, as I said early on, volunteering and so on. Though there was a burst of it in 2020, of mutual aid and hobbyism, but now we're all back to the grind. What is effective? And there's experiments and there's successes here and there, but it's not. I don't think there's been a breakthrough. Something that's gone viral as being the thing that gets people. I guess Bernie was a viral thing that got people going to be engaged in electoral politics.
Sure.
But that blew up, and so everyone's all cynical again, especially the Bernie-crats. They are hesitant to do any electoralism, even when it's with an independent third party that will not repeat. If we have their support, we're not going to repeat that. It won't be the same as before. But in their minds, it might be the same. And this kind of comes through with the woman who was a strong Bernie-crat, did everything for the Bernie movement, and wants to do that again with the Greens. But I'm like, well, we don't want to repeat that, actually. So we want to build a base of due-paying members and have a staff and have all the things that the Bernie movement couldn't have. Or when its legacy is a smattering of nonprofits that are their own little fiefdoms. The one with Baraga, with the People's Party. You've got, Our Revolution, and then all these blogs that are just defunct now.
Yeah.
So I have trouble arguing for why the political party is. Well, I think I say among others, as in there are many vehicles of change that people need to be made excited for, and that you do that by being there and having a positive impact. And I think you can best do that in people's neighborhoods and city. And it's not going to be on the national level where it just gets absorbed in the big morass, the moribund political system or the news cycle that's week to week. But here is actually, to answer my own problem here, is to return to Howie's case for an independent left party. So in less 10 minutes. Breeze through this. So this is a summary of first a long article he wrote, and then he kind of expanded on it in a book form. So but it's more like a manifesto, it's a 50-page book. So first, he goes through the what doesn't work, the party in a party or fusion strategy. It's not new, and it has deep flaws. They get co-opted by the Democratic Party. It disallows outside options. If you go for that DSA, you can't do something outside. Activists succumb to careerism. Identity as an alternative blunted. It disappears. Then these things disappear from public view as the left is not for itself, but part of a centrist politics. So that's the opening argument for don't do party and party. Reason 2, a full socialist platform is needed. So sorry. The first part of this is the starting assumptions that fusion strategy sucks. A full socialist platform is needed to break polarized economy of rich and poor. Reformers reject social ownership and worker self-interest. Sanders' message was not democratic socialist, but socialist dem, which also disappeared left-wing politics as an alternative. We are reduced to fighting for improving conditions of exploitation over ending it. So there's the independent part, the left part, and now the party part. History of third parties in America. Independent politics has not been valued much in America by the left since the Popular Front policy from the 1930s. The system bends by growing voter rights, which prevents the kind of class conflict that you saw elsewhere, where workers needed to form their own parties because their rights were being withheld by the ruling class. Speaking of Europe. Independence, or anywhere else in the world, really. America is the only place where, since the franchise was expanded every generation or so, then people could be absorbed into the major parties. Anywhere else, they had to start their own if they wanted to be political. So political independence is not the norm, and it never has been. So that's kind of what we're fighting against as Americans. It's a very American problem. But the case for this is that, and in America, independence is treated like a tactic when it needs to be a strategy of successful movements. So what are the parts of this? So more problems. So now he goes through kind of the problems and some more history. So memberless, we have it. American politics is also a history of memberless parties. A flaw of past and current efforts is the co-opting of the corporate structure of major parties. We need a mass membership org made up of people who can hold leaders accountable. Otherwise, you can't. Members in parties now don't have rights or responsibilities. They are run like capitalist businesses. Campaign committees act as monopolies. Primary and other reforms did not break the primary process, the fact that the major parties have primaries. These reforms did not break boss control. They just changed the function of the political boss from the manager of patronage to the manager of donor money. So primary candidates are just as pre-selected, or as recent cycles, they're managed, as in the case of Bernie Sanders. Sanders wasn't selected as a primary candidate, but he was managed to be, he was managed out of being the winner via all the shenanigans of the Democratic primary. And in this cycle, 4 states have just said they're not going to host a primary. So Marianne Williamson or Czech Uyghur, there's not going to even be a primary, but Biden is the candidate. How's that for a grassroots democracy?
Yeah, there you go.
Or
Real
rank
voice
and
of the
file
people.
having a voice. So he goes into the Socialist Party precedent. And I kind of wrote this sort of like, well, how did they not quite make the cut? Like, why didn't they really succeed? But, or I think he kind of holds them up as a member-based party, and that was what made them successful or different. And I think, they kind of failed because of the Popular Front. They were doing okay until the 30s, and then the Popular Front strategy kind of dissolved them. And the same goes for everything else. So the Socialist Party was made up of veterans of the Populist Party. The 2 lessons that they took from during the Progressive era was to not have fusion candidates and to have due-based members who could vote on party decisions. So actual representation. At the same time, they directed primary reform. Okay, yes. So, but while they were doing this, in order to almost counter this, the duopoly, this was the same time that in the progressive era, the primary reforms and the refer yeah resolution not what's the R word where you vote directly for a policy
Oh, referendum. You think?
referendum process. Yes, these were won during the progressive era, and but these reforms, the compromise almost, they're like, why did the bosses allow these to pass? Well, they made political parties now a state organ with state rules on membership.
Hmm.
You know, you're a member if you're registered. Registration, you're not registering with a party anymore. Before, they were independent orgs. Now, the parties are part of the nation state. They're part of the bourgeois nation state. They weren't before the progressive era.
Hmm.
So, in some ways, the progressive era made things worse.
Yeah.
Because it ruled out the Socialist Party. So with these new rules and regs, this handed power to, I put MPs. The professional managers. So after these reforms, the Socialist Party was crushed for its subversion. All left-wing parties followed this atomized membership model because they have to. If they're going to be a legitimate party, you have to follow the model of having a corporate structure and not have real membership. And the Greens have been forced in this position, and kind of why there was like, look, let's not be so focused on electoralism that we have to follow all of these bourgeois rules. So we can be a membership working class party. Kind of wondering if it's possibly both, or as a local chapter, we don't worry about elections. We'd be a due-pace member party, and we fund campaigns and projects to build socialism. So that was a precedent of like, you know, they were doing it, but it didn't work out because of the counter, you know. But now we're the Greens are a legitimate. Well, we're slowly being regulated back into non-legitimate status.
Mm-hmm.
This is because of our, I guess, you know, whatever success we have had. The rules are being changed on the national level or the state level to ensure we can't get ballot access, that we are no longer a legitimate, recognized party, you know. And it's funny, you know, we have to be a recognized party by the very state we're seeking to, well, subvert, or join, or, you know, maybe we want to be accommodationist and compromise once we're in office. We're not even being allowed that. Uniting a working majority, certain breakdown of Americans. He goes into this. So this is how his definition of class is here. There's a 2% ruling class of capitalists. There's a 32% middle class of professionals and managers, and then the 66% of workers who can then be categorized as being within. They're either workers for a small business sector, the oligarchic corporate sector, the unionized public sector, or they're workers under supervision, meaning in prison or welfare or whatever.
Sure.
He does recognize that part of that professional managerial class, meaning in the care sectors, are amenable to working class politics, like nurses and teachers. So these workers need accessible forums to discuss problems for self-education and building solidarity. This was pretty much what Occupy was. It was a forum that everyone could access. A lot of people self-educated, and it builds solidarity. Right? It didn't lead to organization. But if the organization is what's doing this, maybe it can be both. Occupy Albany is what I tried as an org. But again, we were memberless. We couldn't agree, or we just, you know, we couldn't have members because we were following an all-inclusive model. And it's interesting, there are other radicals who wanted to have a membership group, and I didn't join, or others didn't join, so they just folded like within a year, which was, I kind of wish they kind of kept going, but They focused on their careers, so to speak, but
Yeah.
they're not gone. But
Mm-hmm.
they're not doing anything radical in my eyes. Not building socialism anyway.
Yeah.
So bottom up organizing versus top down mobilizing. It goes into mass apathy is alienation from There's mass apathy from alienation and disengagement. An independent party can fill the vacuum of this and avoid reproducing corporate class structures as business unions do. So one goal is to do the education and the lateral communication. The educated work with the rest, not manage them. So no selling out. Party and movement together would then be involved in movement work. Bottom up electoral power. So he's just going through the parts. The usual local governments are run for local elites embedded in real estate and development. They matter. So local door canvas campaigns can reach people without indirect comms, like advertising. Mass spending is unhelpful, actually. Local campaigns are usually uncontested or nonpartisan, negating some obstacles. Usually when we win, we are winning in those kinds of races. Progressives in the Dems don't change the whole thing. That what I wrote? Progressives in the Dems don't change. Do I mean they don't change, or they don't change the whole thing and are used to keep others in? Right, okay. What I mean is progressives who are in the Democratic Party don't change the whole party, and they're used to keep other, leftists in. Look at the squad, basically. There are 500,000 local positions to run for. Our local governments have many powers to advance our program. Demonstrating when we aren't doing local office things and being office holders, we're demonstrating our competence, which opens up the possibilities of running for state offices, which are still technically local campaigns, state assembly and stuff. And they are winnable, given you have a strong field operation using what is called the checkerboard strategy of direct contact versus mass media that covers everything. Checkerboard strategies, you just focus in the areas where people are more left-leaning.
Mm-hmm.
Urban areas, or certain rural areas, actually. You just focus. Just stay away from the suburbs, I guess, usually.
All right.
Where all the reactionaries are. And better conditions. This is just his little ending argument about the conditions are okay to do this strategy I'm outlaying. So the corporate type of workers have grown over the last century, meaning there is less of a difference in worker relations. The middle class and the helping professions are progressive and open to joining with other workers. This was not the case in the last century. And everyone's kind of a corporate worker, or a gig worker. There used to be more difference between, white and, there's differences of blue and white collar workers.
Mm-hmm.
Do they really matter? Or at least if you use managers and professionals versus other types, these distinctions don't really quite matter because you have blue collar workers who are pulling in millions of dollars. It's not like their incomes are pretty good. Blue collar workers in manufacturing, they're being paid magnitudes more than a gig economy worker.
Yeah, well, that's for
sure. Or whatever. So they're really not quite the working class. They are, but they don't have class consciousness, and they're not going to. They see immigrants as their competition. They act as capitalists. They're embarrassed millionaires, and sometimes they are millionaires.
True.
Okay, so that's what I got so far. I think I wrapped that up. I didn't write more. What do you think? We're at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That covers the ground, and it's very straightforward, and yeah, I like that very much.
Now I write it out loud. I'll do some editing so I can read it a little better.
Yeah, but that's pretty good. So, we got to get out of here because I got to get to bed.
Did you get a lot of snow, or is that just the East Coast?
What's that?
Have you gotten any snow, or is that just the East Coast?
We got basically a dusting at this point. We didn't get any snow until a couple days before New Year's. Like we had maybe one snow event, but it melted the next day. But yeah,
Sucks,
it's been a very strange winter.
Yeah, the Great Lakes have no ice cover.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We just got 9 inches here. You know, snow. Like it was a big deal that we even had a snowstorm. So it's like there was a bit of media exaggeration as to how bad it would be. Like, you know, this is the new standard for nor'easter. Not even a foot. I shoveled it within 10 minutes. I mean, get out of here.
The snow lasted for 120 minutes. James says he got cold rain and 120 minutes of snow.
Well, it's no longer here, but it's powder.
Yeah.
You know, it's not big, not a lot of trouble. Yeah. Okay, so
right.
There we go, and I'm gonna work that into my comrade Peter has a eco-socialist lecture because he's a professor, so he has a lecture. So I want to go over that, include it, or maybe that's just part one, and then part two is discussion with this. So I got a sense of how long it took me to go through that. Did we start at 9 o'clock with that, or was it 8:30? Did it take me an hour and a half?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
I know I wouldn't go through all of that at once. I know that because I think the challenges part would be like an open discussion, and that would be one. The values would be something else, with the values and the history, and that isn't really the training, though. I think I want it to be part of it somehow, but I do want it to be like the pamphlet. Like that argument is what breaks my hesitancy about the political party being a necessary vehicle for change. His argument for that is sort of like, yes, we need a party. We need to be left. We need to be independent. These three recognitions are pretty important, and it's compelling, and that's sort of why I'm sticking in, and why I'm going to make Green Party my project for maybe the next few years, or maybe I'll assess at the end of this year.
Yep,
that's what I'll do.
I plan to do
whatever the outcome of the national election is. If Stein gets the same vote total as Howie did, I doubt that, but let's say she got the same vote total as 2016. It's like, so people even more disillusioned and polarized than then, and it didn't matter. Didn't change how people perceived and voted in the election, or the interest in the Greens.
Yeah, unfortunately so. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on. You all can check out Dan's work at 3lefts.news. And look forward to seeing what this year brings and what we talk about next on our show here.
We'll go back to videos, but I guess we gotta experiment.
Yeah.
Not on Sunday evening. Is there another time of the week we can do that?
Well, as it so happens, I'm unemployed at the moment. My seasonal job swore up and down that I would still have work until the middle of January, and decided to let us all go December 26th instead. So
at will employment.
I got nothing but time at the moment. I mean, I spend plenty of time looking for other jobs and interviewing and stuff, but
that itself is a job, and I'm sure it fills your time. I mean, I look at my finances for the times when I was underemployed or something, and it's like you'd think that year would be when I did so much politically or something, and it kind of wasn't. Or I was doing quite a bit, mostly just producing my show on a regular basis, consistently, like no interruptions. I was actually editing the show every week, and I have a few more episodes to go, I think, of my What's Left in Albany. I will do one this week because I do need to hit the station and get groceries afterwards. But I'm really on the fence of whether I'm going to keep. Maybe I'll make this week my last, because I want to move forward with Green Party stuff. I need to cut this out.
Got to carve out some time.
The
and
whole
attention.
point is to stop doing radio. But now I'm not caring about the management side.
Yeah, it sounds like they got their head up there.
So that's it's allowing me to write Green Party stuff at work, but it's not allowing me to use my weekend
for sure
for what I want to.
All right. So yeah, anyway, the point I was trying to make is I got plenty of time, so we'll experiment more about getting this to work. And eventually, I'm sure I'll have the funds to get that YouTube premium, because that seems to be the sticking point in terms of making the video sharing work.
Well, I guess I can technically pay for that. I don't want to, but if it is necessary for us to do what we like,
yeah,
and then maybe I won't have to care about ads, I guess. But maybe if it's just for a year, maybe, or a half year, I can live with it.
Yeah, no, it is nice. It is nice having it, because then you can, like if I'm in the car, I can turn off my phone and still play a YouTube video and just listen to the audio. That is a really nice feature. So I will be getting it back as soon as I can. But
okay, all right then.
For the time being, I just can't.
Maybe I'll send you some cash if you need it, or are you in hard times, or is
Yeah, I'm planning on putting together some kind of GoFundMe pretty soon here. So
wonderful.
Yeah, look forward to that.
In the past, I think we have community orgs that did unemployment insurance. Do you? Have you filed for an unemployment
I'm
insurance?
going to do that tomorrow.
Okay.
So we'll see how much I get from
that. Should be helpful.
But which definitely helps some.
It's just like we don't have nothing. It's just that the welfare state makes it very hard. So that makes us against
they definitely
the
don't
state
make it easy,
because it's a capitalist state. So if it wasn't, there'd be no argument. We'd all just get it.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, let's not wax the pine. Good night.
Yep.
And good.
Have a good one, and I'll see you soon.
I'll message you Wednesday.
Cool. Alrighty. Let me just turn on that. Oh, why is it not coming up? There we go. All right. Thanks for joining, everybody. Thank you, James, for giving your input as well. Yeah, I will be streaming more often until I get employment again, so you can look forward to that. Can do some stuff in the middle of the day. Maybe even do some kind of fundraiser for myself, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, I will see you all next time. Have a good rest of your fleeting weekend.